This is Simplified Success, the podcast, hosted by myself, Krystal Blackard.
And me, Lindsay Reynolds.
Between the two of us, we have cultivated over $60 million in sales online. We have led big teams and operated in very high pressure environments where leadership either frankly stabilizes or everything completely falls apart. Right, Linz?
Yeah. And everything else in between, from being each other's weddings to making sourdough, helping each other be good moms and raise kids. Man, we have a blast on here, and we feel just so excited to have you guys be hearing the podcast and be on here, because we feel like this is just a place for us to be able to pour back into you and serve well, from all the cool places that we've had the opportunity to. Our fun pastimes are whiteboarding out our next business opportunity. So welcome to
Absolutely.
our fun conversations.
Absolutely. We move fast and we build smart, and we have a lot of fun here. So welcome to Simplified Success, the podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to Simplified Success, the podcast. And today I am over the moon excited to have one of my dear friends and business mentors. Business mentor probably really doesn't even begin to describe the power and the influence that this man has had on my life. And we're going to get into that. But today I'm so excited to have the Russ Fletcher. I almost feel like it should be like Dr. Russ or Professor Russ. But we
It's
can get
funny
into all
because when
of.
I travel in Latin America, they call me Dr. Fletcher. I
Well,
don't
I
correct
see.
them.
Yeah, see, I kind of want to do that too, just out of like immense respect. So I don't know, but of course we're gonna dive into your journey, but you guys, like, first of all, Russ has 10 children. I feel like that should be called out very first of all. 10. And how many grandchildren do you have, Russ?
6 2/3.
6 2/3. So there's a little 2/3 that's baking right now. That will be
Right.
7 shortly. Russ's wife is this amazing philanthropist. I can't ever say that word, who has a love for life, a passion for everything she does. I at some point, we need to have Deborah come on here too, because Deborah is like, if you know Russ, you need to know Deborah, because they're just such a cool dynamic. So I just think I put something into motion right there. Oops. Not sorry. Russ has been like, he has led executive teams to greatness. He is a business consultant. He is a leader of leaders. He leads with the utmost principles and integrity. Gosh, he has led and been a part of political campaigns that have had huge breakthroughs and huge runs of success. Russ, there's just not a lot that I feel like in your business career that you've set out to do that you probably haven't done. I know that's probably a loaded statement. Recently he has added author to his repertoire of accomplishments. And so I know that I could just keep going on and on. Like I said, Russ was at the helm of the ship of the company that I partnered with for over a decade. And so it's a really cool experience for me to get to sit in this room, Russ, and visit with you, because I came into that company, wasn't green in business. I was like 0 in business skill. Like, I had 0 anything when I started there. And we started at the same time. And I would say that your leadership and your influence and the way that you led that company to the greatness was a huge part of the reason why I had so much success over there. And so grateful for your leadership and mentorship. And so such a good fit for this podcast. But we're just going to go ahead and dive right in. So first of all, before we get started, I know I've left out some really cool things about your intro. So I want you just to kind of like catch us up to date, which I know that's like another loaded question, but catch us up to date, like, of how you, Russ Fletcher, got to the point you are right now, because like you're in this really cool season of life where you've had this amazing career, but you keep on going to this level of greatness. So take us to where you started your college career, kind of walk us through a little bit of your journey, and then we're going to get into like this book that you've written, your business consulting that you're fixing to launch, like all this really cool stuff that you're doing. Okay?
I mean, I don't know. I just came for the introduction. So thanks for having me. I'm going to go now. Um, I mean, so there's so much that goes on in everyone's life, right? I mean, one of the things that people tell me is that I'm a great storyteller, and I appreciate the compliment. I think everybody's life has stories, and so you just have to learn, how to capture them and tell them, because I think everybody's life is fascinating. I was telling that to someone the other day, and they said, "Oh no, not my life." And I said, "Yeah, didn't you have this and this experience?" And they said, Oh, yeah, I guess I did. So, in that regard, I don't feel like my life experience is particularly so much more dramatic than others. I've had some fun experiences. I mean, started life. I grew up in New Jersey. My dad was a scientist at Bell Laboratories, and that was by itself fascinating to go out to my dad's office and see that the science that was happening there was just amazing. And then, I grew up in a time and a place where I was outside all day, right? I mean, maybe you've heard
Yep.
the stories, right? Where in the summer you left your house in the morning, and whoever house you're at lunchtime fed you, and you came home before the streetlights turned off. So I had this freedom from the very beginning, and my parents fostered that. You'll laugh. For graduation from high school, do you know what they gave me?
What?
Luggage.
That's a hint, right?
Hey, congratulations on graduating high school. Get out of the house.
Right.
And so I mean, I left my home at 17. I graduated from high school at 17. I left for Boston, and I really didn't ever go back. I spent the summer after my freshman year in Boston, and then I went on my mission service trip for 2 years, and I never moved home again. So that sense of freedom and independence. I mean, that's powerful, and we should talk about that more because I don't think a lot of people are getting that in their lives these days.
Mm. Mm.
So I went to MIT, um, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I say that because living in Utah now, people sometimes say, "Where in Montana is that?" I'm like,
Ima
so no, not in Montana. So I went there and I was happy to compete with the best of the best. I say that because I was the only member of my freshman orientation group that was not his high school valedictorian.
Mm.
So, they're going around, oh, I was valedictorian at this high school, this high school. And I went to high school in New Jersey. Um, I was a solid B student at MIT. So I felt like I could compete with the best of the best, even though I wasn't the very top of that. And that was fine with me.
Mhm.
That's how I got started. And then as opportunities came along, I always just sensed like, oh, the phrase I was used to use was, how hard could it be?
Yeah.
How hard could this be? So I took a job right out of college at a consulting firm in Boston. And one day we're sitting around as a boutique consulting firm, probably, I don't know, 15, 20 employees total.
Mhm.
Boss had a big company lunch. He announced the company that we had sold a consulting contract to a company called Lotus Software Company, at the time, one of the top 5 largest software companies in the world. And he said, okay, so I need somebody, this guy's going to lead it. Michael's going to be our lead consultant on this. I need somebody to be our research associate, which was my title at the time.
Mhm.
I was down in the room and I said, how hard could it be? I'll do that.
Mhm.
And so I jumped into the world of software development and became immersed in that world for the next 15 years. That one moment of saying, how hard could it be? Changed the trajectory of my career.
So were you married at that point when you had that
Yes.
job? Okay.
Yeah. So funny story. My last semester at MIT, we were married and had our first baby already.
Okay.
And so he was, the time of this story was probably 3 months old.
Okay.
I was taking a class in fluid dynamics, and I didn't really like the class very much. I mean, one of my organities, fluid dynamics, famous last words, right?
Yeah.
And so I got enough points on the first not essays, quizzes and tests and homework and labs,
Uh-huh.
100 points, 100% on all those first until I'd amassed enough points to pass the class.
Perfect.
With the baby in one of those baby backpacks, went in to see my professor. I said to her, look, I've got enough points to pass your class. I'm not coming back. She looked at me and she said, you're not coming back? And I said, yeah. So you're one of my better students. And I said, I appreciate that, but this is what I'm working on right now. I've got a son. I've got to get a job. I mean, this is what I need to be doing.
Mhm.
And she said, well, that's the first time that's ever happened to me. And I didn't go back to class and I got a D, but I passed, which is all I needed to get to graduate.
Yeah.
So, how hard could it be has been sort of this mantra. So how hard could it be? I went to work for Lotus Software Company. Later on, I was working for another consulting company and they sent me to Latin America. They billed me as a banking systems expert who spoke perfect business Spanish. None of those things was true. But how hard could it be, right?
Right. Yep.
So I learned how to do that, and I did that for 6 years.
Wow. And so you moved your family down to Latin America with you?
No, I traveled. I traveled down to Latin
You
America.
traveled, you commuted. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I commuted to Latin America. Yeah, I remember I came home one time. I think we had 5 or 6 kids at the time, and my wife put a sticker on me that said, "Hi, my name is Dad."
No sarcasm there, right?
Oh, I guess I need to take care of this and not travel quite so much.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very classy way to do that. Props to your wife.
What's led me to the next direction, right? So I was having this experience of traveling like this. My wife was very, frustrated isn't the right word, but she was very stressed. It's a lot on her at the time.
Yep.
And I was sitting and talking to a friend of mine, not an acquaintance more than a friend. And I said, "So, what are you up to?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to go back to school and get my master's degree in business." I just had this overwhelming feeling. The hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I just had this overwhelming feeling. You're supposed to go do that. So I kind of grilled him about it. So what's the process? Blah blah blah. And he said, "Well, the application's due in 2 weeks. I'm here to get an interview with a mutual friend of ours. That's why we met there." And I remember thinking, I'm supposed to go do this. The inspiration was, I'm supposed to go do this.
Yep.
Went home
So
that night.
you knew that was your direction. You
Yeah,
just so you're a knower. You have that intuition, that knower intuition.
I think so. Some of the time, anyway.
Yeah.
And so I went home and I said to my wife, I said to Deborah, "Look, I think I'm supposed to go do this." She said, "I think you are too." And so we prayed about it, felt good about it, and then I set out to get all the interviews done, get all the application done, and then there was a test called the GMAT you have to take to get into graduate school for business. And the next test date was after the deadline. So I called up the program and I said, "Look, I'm registering. I've got all my information. I got everything in. I did everything I was supposed to do,
Mhm.
but I can't take the test until after the deadline." The guy literally said to me on the phone, "Better do well on it. If we're going to accept your test scores late, they better be good."
Gotta be good. Yep.
He wasn't kidding. And so I thought, okay, so I'm studying like I bought a book. I'm studying like crazy. And I remember I went to a friend of mine who's very close to God and close to the Spirit. And I said to him, "Counsel me on this." And he said
Mhm.
this, I'll never forget it. He said, "Look, Fletch," he said, there are people who have already passed on the other side of the veil between here and heaven,
Mhm.
who are your family members who are aware of who you are and what you're doing.
Mhm.
They'll be attentive to you if you need their help, they'll be there."
Mhm.
I remember that's a weird thing to say to somebody, right? Ghosts are going to be part of my future here, and he didn't say that, but that's the way it felt.
Yep.
Anyway, I get into the test, and the first part was an essay, and my grandfather was a great essayist, and so I just felt my pen just go. I
Mm.
wrote the essay parts very well, and the next part was the math part. My other grandfather was a great, scientist and mathematician. I consciously thought, okay, I'm ready for your help.
Yep.
Long story short, I got a perfect score on the GMAT.
Wow.
That's actually not quite true. I missed one, but it's only because I skipped it for some reason. I have no idea. I
Oh,
skipped one question, so I got an almost perfect score. Everything I answered, I got right. And when I called in the
wow.
score to the school I wanted to go to, they said, "Well, you get in. So you
Wow.
get good score." So that how hard can it be became, well, where does God want me?
Yeah.
And as part of that, the guy that introduced me to the business school program
Mhm.
worked for New Skin, which is how I got into
But
network marketing.
wait a minute though, there's a part of this story, and I just know your story. You worked for a really cool, well-known tech company too there for a minute, and you helped launch. Have you gotten to that part yet?
The cool tech company that I worked for a little bit and helped launch. Help me remember what you're talking about.
Well, didn't you do something for Microsoft or
Well, so I worked for
one of those?
one of my consulting clients was WordPerfect, which is the very large software company, and we almost bought them.
Yes.
And
Okay.
we attempted to buy. That's what brought me to Utah from back east. Was this opportunity to buy? That was actually before the MBA experience. But yes, that was pretty cool. And I consulted for them, and I helped them prepare for. This makes you sound super old, but the coming of Windows.
That's it. That's what. Yeah, the coming of Windows, which is well, but it's also a precursor to where we are today. Like those things had to happen, and it is. I mean, we look back on those systems, and yes, they're archaic compared to what we have today. But holy cow, they paved the way. Like I remember when that stuff was launching. You
Yeah,
know, I mean, and here we are. But you've been a part of that world and that growth and that development for. That's pretty impressive, Russ. That's pretty cool.
So 1997,
Yeah.
no,
Not that
1994,
long ago. That's not that long ago.
1994. I was backstage with a guy named Alan Ashton, who was one of the founders of WordPerfect,
Mm,
sitting in the green room as he was going on stage to launch WordPerfect for Windows.
mm,
And that was pretty dramatic thing for the
pretty
world at
cool.
that point.
Yeah, pretty cool. Now, you spoke of your granddads too, and is it your granddad or your dad that was the Nobel Peace Prize
Not
recipient?
Peace Prize. He was a Nobel Prize winner in physics.
Nobel Prize winner in physics. Okay,
Yeah,
which is
that's my
also
grandfather.
your grandfather, which is a really cool call out because I think that, like you said, like those things, like the things from your past have absolutely set into motion who have you become today. And I mean, that's just such a rich history and such a rich, like, family heritage and legacy to come from. So I wanted to pull that out of your story too, because I've
So
always
it's
remembered.
interesting because when that is part of your life and part of your story, you don't think about it as being special.
Right.
There's just this is my grandfather. I went fishing with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
My other grandfather was a senator. He was a senator for 24 years, and he was one of the 6 senators who went and visited President Nixon in the White House to try to convince him to resign after the Watergate scandal.
Wow.
I didn't know anything about that at the time. I was a little kid, but
Yeah.
now in hindsight,
Right.
to learn those kinds of things and to know that this is my family, I played Scrabble against that grandfather.
Yes.
And so that's my relationship to him was not on this basis of his being famous, just my grandfather. But the fact that he was famous kind of throws people off. I was sitting at a family reunion, I guess, of sorts, and I was looking over at my cousin's husband, and he was shaking his head. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, I just have a hard time explaining this to people back at work when I go back to work on Monday." There's a University of Utah philosophy professor, and there's the former U.S. senator from Utah, and there's the current U.S. senator from Utah, and there's the doctor that helped work on the artificial heart, and these are all just my family.
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, he get used to it." He said, "No, you don't really get used to it."
Well, I think it's important though to call out because I think one of the words that if I were looking to describe you, and I know the listeners are the people who are going to be engaging in this and just really soaking this in, leadership is something that just is intrinsically running through your veins. It's part of your legacy. It's who you were born to be. Like you probably could have like said no and pushed against it, but it would have been very counterintuitive from where you were raised. And it's interesting because I think from a standpoint of just being you and observing you, you don't know any difference. Just like you said, you played Scrabble against that grandfather. But I think that it's so important to understand these legacies of leadership that are left behind because in my observation, being able to learn and be mentored and be able to be guided by people like you who have leadership in their veins and in their bloodline and their legacy is so critical from learning to learn how to do it excellently.
Hmm.
Would you agree with that?
I agree with that. So
Mm.
I appreciate you saying that. I don't think about. You're right. I don't think about that in terms of who I am or who my family is. But I had this experience some years ago. We were at a family reunion for my wife's side of the family,
Uh-huh.
and they had this little competition, or there's all
And
these
your oh,
stations.
wait a minute, and your wife's dad was what? Because he had a pretty big leadership role
So
too.
he was a national hero from Guatemala.
Uh-huh.
He was a decorated Army hero, I guess is the right word. He was awarded an award like equivalent of our Congressional Medal of Honor for
Yeah.
Guatemala.
Yeah.
So he's a huge humanitarian, which is where my wife's humanitarian roots start, is from her
Mhm.
father. Anyway, so her family, they had this family, and it was a competition. There were all these stations, and your family had to compete against each other. And of course, my family is nothing if not competitive, and so we were like, we're going to win this. And so one of the stations was a 12-foot wall, completely flat. We had to get your whole team up over the wall as fast as you could do it.
Hmm.
And I said to my family, I turned to my family and I said, listen, do you want to learn how to do this or do you want to win? They said, we want to win. I said, okay, so don't ask any questions. Just do what I tell you. I said, okay. So they said, start. And so we had our whole family, all of our, well, the babies didn't go because they're too little, but
Yeah.
all of the 8 boys and me over the wall and my wife over the wall in 30 seconds. And the fastest that any other team had done it was like 2.5 minutes.
Wow.
So then one team complained, well, you got all these boys, right? That's not fair. I said, tell you what, let's get your team together with my team. We'll get us both over in less than a minute. And so I said, don't ask any questions. Just do what I tell you.
Yep.
She set up these teams. We got all teams over, his team and our team together over in less than a minute. And
Wow.
it's just one of those things where, okay, you can lead, or we can learn, or we can lead first and then learn, but you can't do both at the same time.
Hmm.
And so you're sort of teaching by example. And so I find myself doing that a lot. And sometimes I have to sit back and say, okay, in this instance, I'm a policy follower, not a policy maker. I'm just going to sit back. I'm just going to do what I'm being asked to do, even though I may not either understand it or agree with it. They're not really asking for me to weigh in. And that was a huge revelation for me, as I was growing up, to recognize there are moments when they're not really asking for you to lead. They're just asking for you to be there as a helper. And so that's fine. And that's an important lesson we all should learn too.
That is such a good nugget. Like, I just had a huge epiphany. Like, we can either lead or we can learn, but we can't do both at the same time sometimes. And sometimes when you're in the thick of things, building businesses, doing life, working on really big projects, moving forward, like, you can sit there and learn, and you can learn, and you can learn, or you can just lead and get through it. And sometimes that is the better option. I completely agree with you. That's such an interesting call out, because I feel like that is where so many people get stuck, Russ.
So I had to laugh. So my son, one of my sons, went to a parent-teacher conference, and his teacher said, so, your son is great. He's very smart. We love him, but he doesn't follow very well.
Oh.
So we have these tables of 6, and when it's his turn to lead, his team always wins. And when it isn't his turn to lead, he tries to lead anyway, and he gets in the way.
Oh.
And I remember saying to myself, why don't you just let him lead then? But they want him to learn how to follow too, and I get that. So sometimes, you just have to sit back and go, okay. In this instance, the price of my participation is not that they need me to lead; they just need me to be a good follower, and I could do that. Can't do that in situations where I think somebody is, doing something dishonest or immoral or anything like that. But
Right.
But if the circumstance means my leadership is going to be more damaging than valuable, I'll give you an example. We had a family business. My family, my mother's family, had a big family business.
Uh-huh.
My grandfather started it with his brother at the turn of the 20th century, and it made him a lot of money.
Okay.
So much so that by the time he was in his 50s, he was able to run for the Senate and pay for his own campaign, and he was very wealthy.
Wow.
And his brother ran it while he was a senator. When his brother passed away, my grandfather appointed my uncle, my mother's oldest brother, to run the company, and he was not very good at it. In fact, he ran it into all kinds of financial trouble. Company had been around forever. This very successful business is now in financial trouble. So my grandfather retires from the Senate and decides he's going to take it on himself. Only it's a young man's game, right? He was 74, 76 at that point. So he went to his youngest son, Bob Bennett, who later became the senator. And he said to him, I want you to run this company, family company. And my uncle said this. He said, no, I would rather have a relationship with my brother than save the family company.
Wow.
If I step in and save it, I might be able to save, the company, but my brother will never talk to me again. The family company went under, and Bob did not step in and save it. And he still had a relationship with his brother until the day they both died. So that was an interesting lesson for me because, why wouldn't you step in and save it? You're a leader. You know how to do this. Save this. But that was the lesson for me was there are deeper things than just being successful.
And understanding the difference. And that's such an interesting call out, because I think often too, and you just also preface this, and I would qualify that the statement that you just made, understanding when your leadership could be harmful and understanding when it's necessary. That to me is the difference between a level 4 and a level 5 leader. Level 4 leaders often lead out of ego, pride, a lot of things, right? Level 5 leaders understand that there is a time and they have to step in, but there's also a time when they could do more damage than good. And that is something else you've taught me, a coined phrase is strength under control.
Prowess. One of my favorite words in Greek is the word praus, which means strength under control.
Mm,
Translated from the Hebrew, it means meek. So when you read the scriptures now and you read the word meek, you should be thinking strength under
Strength under control.
control.
Mm-hmm.
And that statement, once I learned that, I thought, well, this changes my whole perspective on what it means to be a meek follower. You're not being a meek follower, you're taking your strength and you're submitting it to someone else.
Yeah.
One of our core values to the last company where you and I met was the core value of no egoness, we used to call it.
mm,
And somebody said, why don't you just call it humility? And I said, they don't mean the same thing.
mm,
No egoness is you have an ego. We want you to bring your ego to this company, but we want you to subject it to whatever we're doing together.
mhm,
We want you to recognize you have an ego. If you wouldn't be successful without one, but we also
mm,
want you to make sure that here we're not expecting your ego to win. Here
Right.
we're expecting your ego to be governed by the overall good of the whole company.
Yeah.
And that was very powerful for me to learn, and it was powerful for us to do. And once people started to do that, then you start to go, okay, well, what's the limit to what we can do? Nothing. There's no limit
Mm,
at that point.
mm.
I don't know who
Well,
said it first, but one of
we-
my favorite phrases is there's no limit to the amount of good we can do as long as we don't care who gets the credit.
well, and interestingly enough, too, I know you don't care who gets the credit, you just said that, but interestingly, during the time that you were there leading that company did have to install new ranks and new levels because there was so much success driven from what I believe was true principle centered leadership governed by biblical principles and very much where the egoness was let aside, that it showed up very greatly in because when leadership is in play and principle centered leadership is actively being pursued and followed by the entirety of the of said company, profitability follows that. It's just a byproduct of it. You can't help it, right? And we all know this, but interestingly, as you were saying that, I was thinking, I was like, yeah, it's interesting because when I started that company, there was a level people could get to. And then in the mid, like in the height of it, they had to go back and add new ranks because people had outranked those current levels that nobody thought would ever happen. And I was one of those people that hit one of those ranks, so I can speak to it personally. But that's an incredible, like, wow, so many, I'm just having so many like thoughts, right? This is so cool, Russ. Like, this is so interesting. Such a timely conversation.
Well, that experience at that company was so interesting because when I got there, I said to the people who hired me, the board and the owners, I said to them, look, I'm not interested in doing this unless I can do what I want.
Mm,
They said, what do you mean? And I said, well, there are things called a governing board from managing board. If you want to be a
mhm,
managing board, that's fine, but get somebody else.
mm,
If you want to be a governing board, in which case you oversee what I'm doing and sort of give me feedback and keep me within the reins of what you want me to do, great. I'm willing to work for that. But if you want to be a managing board, I'm not going to come. I'm not going to take this job. And they agreed to be a governing board, but I had to remind them all the time. Don't forget, because of that, that gave me some free reign to do some things.
mm,
And one of the things was I got a chance to observe the company before I had to really dive in and make any significant changes.
mhm,
I took 3 months and did not really do well. I that's not true. We rewrote the whole presentation for the first event, which was 2 weeks after I started.
mhm,
I scrapped the whole agenda and rewrote the whole thing with the input from people. But other than that, we didn't make any significant changes for a little while because I wanted to get the sense of what it was.
mhm.
And then when we started to move, we moved really fast, and
Yeah,
that was super fun.
it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. And it was a really cool time. And I will tell you, just as an experience of somebody who was on the other side, I was a distributor in that company. Obviously, we're referring to an MLM company. But as a distributor there, so women, interestingly enough, our two biggest needs are safety and security, right? If a woman feels safe and she feels secure, she will thrive in that environment. It works for marriages, it works in businesses, it works like it's a universal need of a woman. Men need respect, women need security. And I will tell you, I was in a life situation where, like in my personal life, I had zero security. And so when I came to that company, there was security for me. And I look back, and as I reverse engineer and as I think about that, I know that's why I thrived in that environment, even though I had such a hard personal life at the time, was because there was so much security there for me. And that is attributed to the leadership of who ran the helm of our ship, and very much to your caller. And I know you're probably like, okay, Krystal, but it's true. And it's interesting. I mean, it's hard to have this conversation without talking about our interwoven journeys, because we have spent the better part of the last over a decade very much traveling the world together, doing things together, getting to know each other. So it's hard to not think through those, you know?
So we had an employee at the company who had a reputation for being a player. He liked to flirt. He liked to and occasionally do more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And he got himself into some trouble, and we had to step in and
Uh-huh.
reprimand him and help him understand that type of behavior was not going to be acceptable to us.
Uh-huh.
Shortly after that experience, he got married, and his wife, he several times he planned to leave the company, and his wife said to him, "No, you're a better person when you work here than you would be if you left the company."
Wow.
And he said, "What makes you say that?" And she said, "Well, because you're interacting with these people who have commitment to their families, and they're committed to living a moral life, and some things that maybe you weren't raised with. And I'm not asking you
Mhm.
to be religious like they're religious, but you're a better person in dealing with them."
Yep.
And then he did leave the company eventually, and he's divorced now, and so that's
Hmm.
I've often wondered. We haven't really stayed very close in touch, but I've wondered over the years, was that always brewing, and he just was able to put it off because he was interacting with us on a regular basis? I'd like to think that we had that kind of influence, but maybe he was himself, and that was going to happen regardless eventually.
Hmm. That's an interesting thought. I truly believe, like, we are who we surround ourselves with, right? So if you're surrounding yourself with good and with people that hold themselves to a standard of excellence, a standard of a high moral compass, a standard of really walking in, like, excellence, if you mess up, you pivot quickly, right? Because that's a thing. I truly believe that that has such an impact, and when people step out of that, whether it's with work or with relationships or friendships, they tend to adopt those same habits. So, yeah, I would completely agree with that statement.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you say pivot quickly, because I think that that's one of the hallmarks of quality decision making is speed.
Mm,
A phrase that I particularly like is the phrase "kill the closest snake."
yeah.
So you're familiar with the Indiana Jones?
Yep.
He's down in the pit with all the snakes,
Yep.
10,000 snakes around him. Which one do you kill?
The closest one.
You don't worry about the ones coming through the wall over there, right? Because they're
Right.
not going to get to you for some time.
Ooh, yeah,
The
yeah.
one that's right here, he could strike you right now. So you got to kill the closest snake. You have to constantly be looking at, look at the future, the horizon where you have to get to. And there's lots of snakes between here and there, but the one you got to focus on is this closest one.
Mm,
And so many people are spending their time worrying about stuff that's out over there. The closest snake bites them.
yeah.
And
I
so,
totally agree.
anytime I think about this, I think, okay, so you have to do both. You're looking for a way to escape that terrible, tomb, but you got to keep killing the closest snake, and that's people forget that, and that's all about speed of decision making.
Yep. And when you have I believe when you have a really clear process for decision making, like, you understand your identity, what you stand for, and you true up to that identity on a regular basis, and you have standards in play every single day that you operate from, you can pivot back, because that's the thing about it. I remember, I can't remember which year it was, but there was a year where in that company that we were both in, there was one of the speakers that you guys had brought on, and she talked about all about owning her fears. And I read the book, and I decided to, like, go after my fears. Well, one of my biggest fears, believe it or not, I'm gonna call myself out, was like, kinda owning my own mistakes and eating crow. So I wrote on my board that year that I was gonna overcome my fear of eating crow, and I'm telling you, I ate more crow sandwiches that year than I've ever eaten in my life, but it was so good for me because I was young, I was in my, very early 30s, I was making a lot of money, Like, the ego was, like, probably through the roof, like, I mean, we were having six-figure months at that point, and so I had to make some course corrections, and so that was one thing that I felt very called to do, and I'm telling you, that exercise right there taught me how to pivot so quickly because I got tired of eating those crow sandwiches. They were
Hmm.
t and I literally would envision every time I'm, like, biting into this crow, I'm like, "You gotta go fix that, Krystal, that was your mistake." And I'm so thankful, again, for that leadership that you guys instilled in us because that exercise alone and that standard has allowed me to anytime I mess up, I really try to pivot quickly, and I believe that's what has perpetuated my life to going through my season of suffering into the life that I am in now, which is, like, beautiful and peaceful and just, like, calm because I was able to really learn that particular thing really well, and that learning that and implementing the speed behind it, like, chaos leaves. And that's essentially it. In leadership, you can't afford the chaos. You gotta be able to navigate that quickly.
I heard a story some time ago that really resonated with me, and it caused me to use the phrase as authentic as a cup of coffee. And this is the story. Apparently, some undersecretary of defense was an expert in some particular field, and he was invited to speak. And so the conference sent a first class plane ticket to him to fly out for this conference, and a driver met him at the airport, and they stayed at a really nice hotel and rolled out the red carpet for this guy. And the next morning, the same driver picked him up, took him to Starbucks, where they already had his favorite coffee waiting,
Mhm,
and they gave him the coffee, and he backstage, and he goes on stage, and he speaks. The next year, there had been an election. He was no longer the Undersecretary of Defense, but he was also still an expert in that field. They wanted him to speak again, but he had to book his own plane. He flew economy class. He stayed at a sort of regular hotel, caught an Uber to the conference that day, stopped and got his own cup of coffee, and went on stage to give the speech, basically the same subject matter. And
mhm,
before he began his speech, he told the story that I just told you. Holding the cup of coffee, he said the only thing that was authentic of that whole experience a year ago was the coffee was still my favorite coffee. Everything else was about the title that I held, had nothing to do
mm,
with me.
wow,
The only thing that had to do with me was that I still like this kind of coffee. I
wow,
thought about that quite a bit. How often do we get so caught up in the trappings of things? And I used to say all the time at the company where we met, I used to say, look, your worth as a human being, your value as a person on this planet is no different than my value. I happen to be the CEO. That's a role I'm playing.
mhm,
And the fact that you're playing the role of fill in the blank, whether it's a call center person or the front desk person or a senior executive or a very successful distributor like you were, that's a role
mm,
you're playing. It's not who you are. And when
mm,
you begin to equate who you are because of the title that you hold or some recognition that you're getting, and you think that's you, you're starting to lose out. And
mm,
how many times have we seen that? See people
mhm,
grasping at career accolades or trying to hold on to something they had in the past, and it's sad sometimes because that past could be 30 years ago or
mhm,
50 or longer, and so you want to look at that and go, okay, but who are you today?
mhm,
What did you take from that experience, and what's the cup of coffee? What's the thing that's authentically you
mm,
that came through that? And I was talking to a former employee, and they said, "Don't you miss it?" And I said, "Clarify what you mean by it." He said, "Well, you were the CEO of this very successful, hundreds of millions of dollars company. Don't you miss that?" And I said, "No." And this person said, "You What do you mean you don't miss it at all?" And I said, "Well, don't get me wrong. It was great. I traveled the world, and
mhm,
and did very well financially, and but in terms of I'm a better person for that, but I don't need to go back to being that to be that better person."
mm. That's a powerful statement. That's so true. That is so true. And um, it's an interesting segue because I really do want to get into your book and your current life, and we have talked about all of the greatness, and again, we could go on and on about the leadership that I've learned from you because I did tremendously learn. And you're talking about the climbing over the walls experiences. I'm like, I have sat in rooms with you Maybe we didn't climb over walls, but we had to do things and it's like all these little fun thoughts come together. So I that's absolutely such a great call out. So yeah, you could absolutely stay into that season of like, oh, I led this company at this, but everything is for a season, right? And we've learned that. And I think people that struggle the most tend to get caught up in what was, what could have been, what didn't, what like the heights of it, and don't ever keep moving into the future. And that is something that I have found very interesting as I've walked into my 2.0 season, as I call it. I've gotten remarried in the last year and my life has completely changed. And like I said, just the peace. But it's interesting because I see you really like it seems like as you tell your story, like there could be no more greatness for you. And yet here you are doing more greatness, having like more amazing things. And it's like this really cool paradigm because it's like you had this season, and you moved hard and you moved fast, and I'm sure that it was stressful and it was a lot. And now you're in this really cool season where I feel like you're authoring, you're getting to kind of like enjoy the fruits of your labor, but still stay on this trajectory of greatness and still produce and still get to just really walk in this amazing legacy skill set that you have from past generations. So talk a little bit about that, Russ, like because I'm excited for you to tell about this book that you're writing, about some of the consultant work that you guys are working through. So just let's talk about that.
Well, so the book that I wrote, I've written one already, and it's published and out there, is a book that I've been thinking about for 20 years, right? Maybe
Yep.
more.
And it's in the show notes. We will be linking it. You guys can grab it.
It's called Yell Hard, and I, I had this idea some time ago about this strange thing where this very conservative person takes over Harvard, and then there's some intrigue there. And when I finally got the chance to write it, I wrote it almost exactly a year ago now. It was started it in March of last year. When I started to write it, it didn't come out the way I had envisioned it in my head. I had envisioned it more as a comedy, and yet as I wrote it, satire or farce almost. And as I wrote it, there's some comedic things in it, but it actually came across more like a what if.
Mm,
What if somebody who had these kind of rock solid guiding principles and wanted to reform a place like Harvard without tearing it down,
mm,
um, what would happen?
mm.
And so that's the novel I ended up writing. And I, my wife said to me, "Gee, this isn't what you always said you were going to write." And I said, "Yeah, actually, I think it's better than what I thought I was going to write." So I wrote that book, and it was again one of these things where I'm just like, "Well, I've always wanted to try this. How hard can it be? Let's try it."
Mhm.
It took me about 3 months to write the whole book,
Is that
and
all?
yeah, it's about 400 pages, just slightly less than 400 pages. And my editor said that's good because debut novels over 400 pages, publishers don't like.
Hmm.
So hopefully we'll get, as it gets more following, we'll get more people interested in what we're trying to say there with the book. But it's fun. I wrote it, and it's sprinkled with a lot of the leadership and business lessons. I've
Mm,
actually had a psychologist that read it approach me and said, "So I want to come pick your brain on, these things that you have your character do, because I think this book could actually be a leadership book."
yeah.
And I thought, well, I appreciate that. It's fiction, but I appreciate that.
Yep.
And so that's kind of, my wife said I poured my whole soul into it, and I said I have other things to write, so it wasn't my whole soul. I have other things I'm going to write too. So part of my soul I poured into it, I guess.
Well, it's always growing. That's really cool. I am not surprised that there are very high level tangible leadership lessons to extract out of a great story that you wrote, Russ. It's almost like that's your life. Interesting. So, but isn't that the most fun way to learn is through a story? I mean, I would much rather learn through a really great story of applied principle that I could recall quickly than a syllabus of an outline,
Well,
right?
so still listen an outline, right? There's a place for courses, and there's a place for
Right.
hands-on leadership, and there's a place for storytelling. And if you only appeal to one, you're going to lose out.
Mm.
I remember one of the guys that I worked with there, my chief of staff, he used to say to me, "How come you can recall all these amazing like book references or movie references or even an advertisement that you saw when you were a kid on television? How can you draw those things back from your memory to use them in life?" And I said, "Well, I think everybody can, they just don't."
Mm.
And so they're not used to saying, "Oh, this TV commercial is teaching me a leadership principle."
Mhm.
And when I told him that, he said, "You're never going to find that TV commercial." So I went on YouTube and I went to look for it. Eventually, I found it, and he was
Found
like,
it.
"Well," I said, "So watch this commercial and tell me if it doesn't teach the lesson I'm talking about." He said, "Oh yeah, it really does teach that lesson." Right? So they're all over. You just have to want to look for them
Yeah.
and then call them back to mind. So
Yep. Wow.
book is full of those kinds of things.
Well, I'm excited. Like I said, we are going to link it in the show notes. That way everybody can go read it. I would highly recommend 10 out of 10. Can't wait to get my hands on it and read it, but we will link that. And talk a little bit about too, like I know you've got some other things coming that you've been working on. I think it's I well, let me preface this. I think it's actually coming to you. I don't know that you're out there seeking it. I think because of who you are and the life that you've lived and the countenance in when you which you walk in, right? The lives that you've impacted. I think this season of next of leadership is probably more coming to you than anything. Is my gut feeling. Is that correct? I mean, I don't think you're having to really go out there and hustle the work.
Um, yes, I guess that's probably true. So I've s- because I discovered that I like to write,
Mhm.
I've started writing other things, and so I'm in the process of putting. We used to call them newsletters. I don't know what we call them today. It's it's a website. It's a something or other, right? And the idea is to say, look, let's take what I've been given, what I've learned over the course of my 30 plus years in business, and let's now put it into a place where it's digestible for somebody else and help them understand that it's great to have lived the experience and be able to learn from lived experiences. That's one way to learn. But if you can learn from somebody else's lived experiences and then take yours
Mhm.
on top of it, now you're even further down the road. So I've
Right.
been trying to take these lived experiences and put them into context, and it's very interesting. And some of it
Wow.
just flows, and hopefully, it'll be valuable for somebody else.
Yes.
So I actually have three different of these newsletters. If I can make my own pitch for what I'm doing. The first one is very driven by high level business strategy and perspective, and the idea there is to take all that I've learned and describe it as what I call the invisible contract.
Mm.
The invisible contract is the contract between an employer and its employees, and how should that perform? What should be that contract? Not talking about something written. I'm not talking about an employment contract. I'm just saying what are the unwritten invisible rules now
Mhm.
between the employers and employees, and what should they be? So that's very serious business thought. And the second one is something I'm calling uneven parallel bars, which is is basically for people running home based businesses.
Mm.
And if you're sitting at home, well, I think you'll identify with this. So if you're sitting in your home and your children interrupt you, you're in flow with your business and you're going, and a child needs something, and you put them off.
Mm.
You're in business flow and you say, "Look, I can't help you right now. I just got to finish this business thing."
Mhm.
You feel terrible.
Mm.
You feel like I shouldn't have done that.
Mhm.
So you try to make it up to them. You try to do something for them later, and you're trying your best to balance this out.
Mhm.
And I think the concept of balance is overrated.
Mhm.
I think what you should do is give yourself some grace and recognize that there are times when that's a sacrifice you're making, time with your
Mm.
children, which is terrible. But if you remember that you're not doing it just to make yourself money, you're doing it for them and their future,
Mhm.
then there should be another time in which you're teaching them why sometimes you have to make that choice.
Right.
If you got up and went to an office every day, there'd be a whole bunch of things you couldn't do for your kids because you're at the office. So
Yep.
why should you feel guilty working from home if occasionally you have to say, I can't do that, but I'm here all the time. So that's the trade-off I'm making.
Right.
So that's the second set of things that I'm writing is how to make that trade-off.
Mm.
One of the things that people talk about is, and I used to talk about this too, because there's this concept called context switching.
Mhm.
You're doing one thing and you have to switch and do something else and you have to go back to the one thing and that
Oh, yes.
causes you to lose focus.
Uh-huh.
So I'm trying to talk about the concept of reentry.
Mm.
So context switching says I'm swapping back and forth. Reentry says how do I get back into the swing of things faster
Oh, wow.
and learn how to give yourself some grace that so this time instead of putting your child off, you went and did what they needed, and your business did not get your flow from that day. You sort of interrupted. So how do you step in now and say, okay, how to re-enter that as best I can?
Mm.
And so stop beating yourself up and thinking you're failing at this.
Wow.
You're not failing. You haven't figured out how to re-enter it better.
Have you been listening to me and Lindsay's conversations? Because literally, my husband hates it when I use that word. I literally use that way too much. Anyways, caveat. So Lindsay and I have been talking about, we call it toggle fatigue, where you toggle between different projects and you always have these little like icons open, then you toggle between them. And sometimes it takes your focus flow out of one and you can't be, that's so interesting. And that is such a need, especially in the world we're living in today, where things move so fast, where there's tools you can leverage all these amazing tools to do things at just epic lightning speed, but that doesn't change the fact that we are all humans and we have capacity and we have like limited bandwidth because we are humans. We require food, we require relationships, we require rest, we require things. And wow, I for one, that one is exciting to me because that's something that I struggle with because I am such a doer and I love to produce. I love to move fast. It doesn't scare me to break things if I need to get it done, like we'll go back and fix it and put it back together. So that's such an interesting thing and especially such a well-timed concept to be able to learn.
Well, I want you to think about this. So the reason I called it the uneven parallel bars, that's a gymnastics apparatus for women in
Right.
gymnastics.
Right.
And when they're doing their routines on the uneven parallel bars, they appear to slam really hard into one of the bars,
Mm.
right? And then they bounce back and they go in in another direction. And when you watch it with an untrained eye, you think they must be hurting themselves. Oh my goodness, look how hard they
Mm.
slam into that.
Uh-huh.
When you actually learn what they're doing, they're using that rebounding off that lower bar to propel them into their next trick.
Mm.
And if they didn't hit the lower bar, they would just keep going in the same direction they've been going all along. So
Mm.
the fact that they can use those almost violent encounters gives them the opportunity to do more things. And contrast that with the men gymnastics, have the high bar where they just go around and around and around in a circle.
Mhm.
In order for them to change direction, they have to stop and do a handstand at the top,
Oh, yeah.
and then they switch their hands, and then they can go in another direction. So do you have to stall out like the men do at the top of their routine, or can you use these collisions to propel you forward? And most people don't think about it like that.
Wow, that's powerful. That's absolutely amazing. And it's like I said, so timely, like so timely. I hear that. I hear the buzz of people talking about that, especially with the invention of AI. Because let's be honest, we can write content, we can write sales pages, we can write copy, like take our intellectual property, load it up into some really cool tool, and we can produce things on a massively fast level, right? But that does not mean that we don't still struggle. Like it's almost like there's too much. And then you try to toggle from one task to another and it's you sacrifice quality to get the quantity, or you are toggling too fast, or you're not present when you go to like it's such a struggle. And so, wow, that's going to be
So
powerful.
yeah, so think about that just to take that one step further.
Mhm.
So AI can produce a lot of things for you.
Yeah.
And if it were about quantity, AI is going to be a wonderful boon for you, especially right
Mhm.
now in its infancy. But it
Right.
still can't replace human emotion.
Mm-mm.
It doesn't understand and probably won't ever understand, at least not for some time, what it means to be frustrated,
Right.
what it means to know somebody who has all the talent but can't bring themselves to do the work that they know they're capable of doing. And so leadership and the ability to lead other human beings with compassion and with genuine interest, where does AI play in that?
Mm.
It doesn't play in that. And so I remember my cousin asked a question of AI, and after getting several answers and not solving the problem, he said to the AI engine, "Can you understand how frustrated this is making me feel?" And AI actually answered him, "No, I'm a machine. I don't understand the concept of frustration." So those things now become much more valuable. And if you're really going to be good at whatever you want to do, you get even more powerful in your leadership, because AI isn't going to provide that. Nothing's going to provide that.
Right.
No one is going to
And that
care for you and for your people like you can.
yes, absolutely. That is such a powerful call out, because I think we live in a world today where people think that between automations and AI, you can pretty much scale to any level that you want to, and it's not true. AI has a place. It's a powerful tool. We can do amazing things with it. But actually, it's understanding what it cannot do that I believe is going to set the next really big boom of people who are very successful in the entrepreneurial space apart, and the ones who are
Yes.
absolutely like you, that are keeping the integrity of what they're doing powered by the human brain, because you can't
Yes.
replace experience, frustration, emotion, just like you said. AI can't replace that. And that is such an important thing to note in the world that we're living in currently.
So imagine this. You have somebody you care about, and they're going through a rough patch.
Mm,
AI can remind you to call them.
mhm,
AI can even write a script for what you want to say to them.
mhm,
And you can say, here's the voice I want to use, and here's the, how heartfelt I want you to make this.
mm,
And you can read it, but AI doesn't make you drop by their house
right.
and hold their hand. And that human touch is so much more powerful when it's genuine and real.
Mm,
And, you can get a lot from AI, and maybe some people who are shallow will feel a little less shallow because they have AI helping them, but it's still shallow.
yep, very
And
shallow.
I'm not interested in living a shallow life.
No, no. I mean, I've done that once. It doesn't work out well. I can call myself out. I've grown enough that I can say I did that for a while, and I don't care to ever go back there, because it's an empty circle that leads you nowhere.
So there's a funny story about Jimmy Connors, who was a tennis player back in the 70s and 80s, and he played into his late 30s, maybe even his early 40s. He was playing in Wimbledon, which is one of the most prestigious tennis
Mhm,
tournaments of all time. And he was in the finals. He was playing a player named Pat Cash, and Pat Cash was like 22 or 23 years old. And somebody said to Cash, "How does it feel like playing against an aging star like Connors?"
mhm,
Cash said, "Man, I hope by the time I'm his age, I'm relaxing on a beach somewhere." And they said that to Connors, and Connors said, "Well, with that attitude, he will be.
mm,
I'm still out here giving it. I'm still going. I'm still trying to make my passion into reality. He'll be on a beach somewhere, long forgotten."
yeah,
And that's what ended up happening. Nobody remembers Pat Cash, but people remember the passion that Jimmy Connors played with his whole life.
mm,
When people say leave a legacy, I mean, they're talking about monetary, they're talking about, but what I really think they're talking about, or should be talking about, is caring.
mm,
And how do you demonstrate that you care? Well, it's not about gifts that you give or money that you bequeath or even the humanitarian aid you do. It's the one-on-one. It's talking by somebody's house or dropping off I once dropped off a grocery order at somebody's house. They just had their third kid under 3 years old. I'm sure grocery
mm,
shopping was going to be a nightmare. So I went grocery shopping, and I just dropped it off at their house with no note. Just no, I didn't sign it. I just left the groceries,
mm,
and I couldn't help myself. I stood across the street and watched them, and she just started to cry. And I remember seeing them later, and she said, "You're never going to believe what happened. Somebody brought groceries by our house." I said, "Really?" And she said, "That was amazing. How did they know that's exactly what I needed? They didn't need the money. They had the money. They just need somebody to know that they were there."
Mm,
And I can't give you that.
yeah, I can't. I want to tell one more story about you. You made me think of something, and I know that I know that you're that you probably get tired of this, but I want to say this. I remember one time a couple years ago in our leadership, and when we were working very much in conjunction on a regular basis, and there was a situation where there was a person that was having a hard time. And I remember you calling me and you asking me that exact question. You said, you called me and you said, "This isn't about business, Krystal, but you know this person very well. And this person is going through some hard stuff." And you said to me, "What could I do to help them through this?" And you said, "Could I show up and do this? Could I pay for this service? Could I do?" And I remember that conversation will stick with me for as long as I live, Russ, because it was such a powerful way to show the care and the concern for humanity. And I can't even remember which one you did. But that's not the point of the story. The point was that care and that concern stuck with me. And it was it had snowballed into, like, there was some hard stuff surrounding the situation, like, it wasn't an easy conversation to have, but I remember the impact of your heart for caring for that situation and the impact it made on me, and I appreciate that, so thank you for that, and, I don't know, just a really Russ is such a cool human. I'm thankful to have you on here today, Russ.
Thank you. It's been very fun. I'd love to do this again. If on
Yes.
a podcast or just a conversation, I'd love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with this, you guys, we're going to wrap it up. But Russ and I are not done. We're actually hopping over to another studio and we are going to record our backstage pass. It is exclusively for our Builder Academy membership. So, Russ is going to dive a little bit deeper into some of these principles. If you guys want access to this, got to join the Builder Academy. We will link it in the show notes. But, Russ, thank you for this today. We are so honored, and I will see you in the next studio.
Sounds good. Thanks, Krystal.
Well, thank you so much for listening today. We are so glad that we got the opportunity to spend this time with you. If as you were listening and things felt like wow, or you had one of those moments, what's our favorite? If it's like, oh, that's a nugget, man, we hope that you stick around. We want you to subscribe, and that way you can hear all of the amazing things that we're going to be riffing about and give us some feedback on all the things.
Absolutely. Everything we teach comes from real life experiences. We don't build any tools that we ourselves have not had to use and have been absolutely desperate for ourselves. And so, building crazy revenue streams, building under pressure, turning chaos into structure is actually what we do best. And we have learned from some of the lowest of lows and gotten to come back on top of the mountain. So, thank you for taking that time to listen with us.
Yeah. So make sure you tune in, continue to steal from our 10,000 hours and the amazing guests that we get to bring on the podcast so that you can continue to grow, learn, and be the best version of yourself. So tune in for the next one. We'll see you guys soon.
Bye.